Alright, this tutorial will walk us through doing our data set 1 through the offline version of Excel. So I've created a new workbook. I've already gone ahead and adjusted some of the heights and widths of this, but let's go ahead and label this. I'm going to go ahead and label this data set 1, and then from here we're going to add some of our data from our lab. So we're doing time in seconds versus distance in meters versus 1 over distance versus log of distance versus time squared. So we'll do time versus the first 3, and the last one involves time squared versus distance. And we're looking for our best fit to a straight line. So let's add some of these: time in seconds, distance in meters, distance. And notice I'm not doing any actual formula here. The next one was log of distance, and then we had time caret 2. Now, if I was being correct, I would probably go ahead and make sure those are all caps, but not that big a deal for here. I'm going to go ahead and add some values. Now, I'm going to use the autofill function, so I'm going to select these two values by holding Shift or Control. So Shift selects everything between 2 clicks. Control allows me to select individual or sets of data. And so if I just copy over this 2 and bring it down, it's going to try and match that pattern, and you'll notice it gives me a preview and it's making everything 2, which is not what I actually want. I want this to be 2, 3, and so I will select those, and I'm going to move my cursor until I get a different plus at this corner. When I bring that down, it went to 9. I don't actually need 9, just 8 is fine. And here the values 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64 are coming from my values here. And then to do these calculations, I'm going to use a relative reference. I want to refer to this but have it change as I go down. And so I'm going to do a function which I'm going to indicate with an equal sign. I could also hit this FX button, and I want 1 divided by this distance, and I'll just click it and you'll see it's color coded. And if I copy that down and paste it, it will fill that in for me. This one I want it to be the log of that, so when I type log, you notice it gives me options, and I'll just do log, and it'll default to base 10, and I'll do log of the distance. Don't have to close parentheses, it'll close itself. And then this one, I need to be careful. I'm not doing distance squared, I'm actually doing time squared. And so I have these 3, and I'm just going to drag those down and use that autofill function again to fill these in. I also don't like having too many decimal places here, so I'm going to go ahead and right click and format this cell to a number with 2 decimal places. And then I can just hit OK. And it makes it look a little bit nicer. Alright, our first graph up is supposed to be time versus distance, so I'm just going to select those. I can just use my left mouse click and get that selected, and then I will insert. I want an XY scatter, that's this one, and I just want the data points. We'll notice it's missing quite a few things. It does not have the axis labeled, it doesn't have a legend, and for us, most importantly, it doesn't have a trend line. And I can add a lot of those things by clicking this chart elements. I can also add them from up here, the chart elements, and I could also change some quick layouts. For instance, if I want a quick layout that has those titles already labeled, that works great. I can also click it from here. One thing to be careful about is when I want to add this trend line, do not click this box. We want to actually click here, and it's unfortunately going to be off screen. Let me move my chart down a little bit. When I click that trend line, I want to click to the right. I want more options, and most importantly, I want linear, but I want the equation and R squared. I need both of those checked, and then I can close that out if I need. I'm going to just leave it open over there, and distance and that are fine here. You could also remove those if you wanted. I'm just going to remove the legend, and it scoots things over, makes it bigger. You'll notice that I can just scoot this over. I can also, from my stuff here, I can change the fill, the alignment, a large number of things. But what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and change this information for the title. This bottom one is time in seconds. You can double click, and I seem to have had a number of students that know about backspace but not necessarily delete. And so if they click in here and they go backspace, it goes from that, eats from that one back, and then delete will eat from that one for your cursor forward. And so now I can go ahead and label this distance in meters. And this gives me a pretty good graph. It's almost straight. The straight line here indicated by y equals mx plus b, y equals 10x minus 21. The 10 is my slope. And we can see it doesn't perfectly fit on that straight line. And so that's what this r squared tells me. The closer to the straight line it is, it would fit at a 1, r squared equal to 1. So this is pretty good, but not perfect. So let's go ahead and add another data set. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to select time, and then I'm going to hold control and select 1 over distance. Notice I don't need the distance for this one. Now I'm going to hit insert XY scatter and make a new graph that I'll drag down a little bit, and we can tell which ones are graphed on it. We can also change the data on it a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead here, add some titles. By clicking that, it added both of them for me. We can add the legend. I'll go ahead and add a legend. Notice I don't want to add the trend line because it'll add 2. I want to go ahead and click here and do more options. And then I want to make sure I click this trend line options, not the colors, the shapes. The shapes are actually quite handy if I want to change these data set ones so that they're not always circles. That can be handy if you're printing in black and white, or if you're going ahead and preparing for an accessible one that someone who has trouble seeing colors would be able to read. So this one I see the plot is, notice I grabbed it and moved it. You have to be really careful when you're grabbing the box. This particular one you want to grab right until you get this plus move pop up. You can resize it as you need. You can change the fill of it. You can do a large number of things on it. You can make it 3D. But I'd care about this value, 0.7178. It's actually a worse fit for my straight line, and we can actually see this is more pronouncedly curved. So next data point I want to add, I want to do a graph of time versus the log of distance. And so this one I'm actually going to use something that I often use. I'll select all the data, and then I'll insert one graph that has all of this. And I can copy this one around where I need it. And I will move it down here. And I've got the data set selected. And as I go up, I can see that's distance. I don't need that one. I'm going to just go ahead and delete that. The next one up, I'm going to check this 1 over distance is labeled. And it is in fact 1 over distance. I do not need that. So I just have this one I needed. So I'm going to add my titles, add trend line, more options, click to the right, equation, and r squared. That's a pretty good fit. It's not perfect, but it's not as good as the first one. Now the next one I want to add, notice I'll go in and exit the titles, the axis titles. Next one I want to add would be time versus my distance, time squared versus my distance. Now the way you would normally do this in the online version is to copy the distance squared over. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my time, and then I'm going to select this distance, and so I've got time squared versus distance. I'm going to insert an XY scatter. Yep, I dragged it all kinds of wrong. This doesn't want to crop over. There we go. I'll just scoot it over a little bit. And recenter that. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the trend line. Wait a minute, first thing I need to double check and check my data. So before I do that, I'm going to right click and do select data, and this brings up a box like this, and it says that time squared is my X and my Y, and I'm going to switch those two. I will switch those two, and I should be able to have my I'm just going to go ahead and select edit, and the series name will be distance, and the X values I will select as being time squared, and the Y values I'll select as being my distance. And now when I hit OK, it should be correct. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. I'll just go ahead and remove everything, and I'm going to add a new one. Here we go. X value will be there. Y value will be here. And I can hit OK. And when I hit save, it gives me a nice picture. It looks like this. And I can start adding in the axis titles, a trend line, more options, z-intercept, y-intercept. Notice it did not, when I do that trend line, it did not show the R squared, so I'll click it again down here. And now I have trend line. Doesn't look like I have this one working right. Let me double check my data. And I'm going to remove this. I'm going to edit this. And I'm going to get rid of where it says time up there. Sometimes that confuses it a little bit. And I'll hit OK. Now we can see our R squared is actually correct. And so on the bottom I'm going to make this a little bigger and move this up a little so I can adjust my title. And I see I have a straight line. I don't have a title here. I'm going to go ahead and add a chart title. And this is time squared versus distance. Once I've added all those titles, I'll be able to come down, and somewhere on my graph I want to just go ahead and write out the straightest graph was time squared versus distance, because R squared was equal to 1. Now this allows me to do my data set 1. I've got it nice and plotted. We'll go over how to upload it later. When I do data set 2, one handy thing is to add a new sheet, and I can do my data set 2 starting here. Thank you.